Learning to play the violin can be a really rewarding experience, but there's definitely also parts of it that can be difficult or even frustrating. And unfortunately, just holding the instrument can be one of these frustrating things. The truth is, there's no one way to do it right. The violin has a long history of development, and there's a lot of different schools of thought about how to play the violin. Still, this video is here to help, and I'm going to walk you through some basics of how to hold the violin, try to give you some pointers, as well as pointing out some of the elements where people think differently about it and why they think differently about it. What I want you to keep in mind, though, is that holding the violin is not a very natural position for a human to be in. It takes time both for the muscles involved to develop and for our bodies to get used to how it feels. So while our goal is to find a way to hold the instrument that is comfortable and allows you to play effectively, it's going to take time to A, get your body used to holding the violin, B, learn to differentiate between muscle building and pain due to bad posture, and C, figure out where that pain is coming from and how to fix it. In short, give it time, listen to your body, and stay open to experimenting. Alright, let's get to it.
First things first. Stand comfortably, feet about shoulder width apart, and check to see that your knees aren't locked. You can sway back and forth a bit if it helps. Next, we're going to start with the violin in rest position. Holding the violin in your left hand, place it under your right arm. Be careful with the bridge. Keep your arm or elbow on the chin rest, and you can lightly hold the side of the violin with your right hand. It'll take a little while for your muscles to get used to holding up the violin, so when you're practicing and your arm gets tired, you can take a break by putting the violin in this position for a while. Holding it this way will make you less likely to drop it or bump it into things while you're not playing. It's useful, but definitely not the only way people hold their violin when not playing. It's just a good one to start with until you're more comfortable handling the instrument. Alright, now to get to playing position, we're going to take our left hand and grab the right side, or the bottom of where we're holding it right now, of the violin. You can put your thumb around the neck of the violin. I often like to put it along the back to give me a better grip. Take the violin out from under your arm and hold it out in front of you. You're going to put your arm at an angle, not straight in front of you, not straight out to the side, but about halfway in between. Again, not really a hard and fast rule about exactly, but aim for between 10 and 11 o'clock. Try that out for a while and adjust from there later if you need to. But I've left you hanging, so let's continue. Turn the violin upside down so the scroll is pointing to the floor, and then bring the violin in towards you. Don't crane your neck or your head toward the violin, just stand up tall and comfortable and bring the violin toward you. The spot you're aiming for is your collarbone, which forms sort of a shelf on the side of your neck.
There's some debate about where exactly the end button should be compared to your neck. A lot of people teach that it should be a little bit in front of your neck, over there. For me, mine often ends up actually quite far into my neck. That's possibly because I derive a lot of my technique from Baroque playing.
Especially when I don't use a shoulder rest, which I'll talk more about at the end of the video, I try to find out where the violin can balance on my collarbone without my help so it doesn't tip either direction. If you are using a shoulder rest, you can adjust the height of each side of the shoulder rest to what feels comfortable for you. Again, experiment with this over time. Just make sure that the shorter side of the shoulder rest is on the side of the violin that rests on your shoulder, and the longer side on your chest. Now, the name of the chin rest is a little misleading. You don't really want to put your chin on the chin rest, but your jaw. I use the corner of my jaw mostly to hold the chin rest, which means I only need to tilt my head slightly, if at all, and just use the weight of my head to keep the violin in place. If the instrument is balanced, or the shoulder rest adjusted properly so it's tall enough, and your violin is in the right position, you shouldn't have to squeeze. The weight of your head should be enough to hold the instrument. A lot of teachers, especially Suzuki method teachers, encourage students to be able to walk around the house holding the violin only with their head. Next, let's bring our left hand out to the end of the violin. The finger spacing we use is with the second and third fingers close together, and with a space between the first and second fingers. When you put your left hand up, the side of your hand at the index finger is going to be against the fingerboard, and you can curve each finger and put each fingertip comfortably on the string. Put down the second and third fingers first, and try to balance around those. The pinky is the weakest finger, and we want to accommodate that. The first finger is a much stronger finger, so it can handle reaching back much more easily than the fourth finger can handle reaching forward. This is especially important if you're playing viola. Your hand should be high enough that you can comfortably put down each finger on the tip of the finger, not on the pad. You can see the finger really curls in, forming a bit of a lopsided square. You'll find that the base of your finger here will more or less line up with the edge of the fingerboard. As for the thumb, think of it as a supporting finger. I use the top part of my thumb to hold up the instrument. You'll notice that I do this differently on violin than on viola due to the difference in size and my general setup. By this point, you won't be surprised to hear that there are different schools of thought on the left thumb, and you'll notice that while most violinists seem to use the top part of the thumb to hold the violin, leaving a space here between the thumb and the fingers, there's also players like Itzhak Perlman who have their thumb much higher. My advice? Find a position that each finger can find its spot easily and comfortably, and see where the thumb needs to go to best accommodate that. For most people, that's going to put the thumb between the first and second fingers or near the second and third fingers. The important thing is not to squeeze the thumb. Teachers who teach a straight thumb holding with the top of the thumb are wary of bent thumbs or high thumbs, not because they're bent or high, but because they can be a symptom of squeezing. Here's an exercise. Put down your violin, hold up your arm, and bend your wrist so that your fingertips are pointing up. Now make a fist. You'll notice that takes a lot of work here in the forearm and wrist. Now put your wrist straight so it makes a straight line with your hand. This is much easier to make a fist. And if you relax your hand back a little to where it naturally wants to go, it's easier still. But when you transfer that back to the violin, if you let the wrist collapse to that neutral position where it wants to go, that's going to make it a lot harder for the fourth finger to find its place. So the straight wrist is a balance between less tension, but still getting yourself set up for a healthy pinky placement. With that in mind, it shouldn't be a rigid straight wrist, but a relaxed one. Your left elbow, when your fingers are on the A and E string, should be in a neutral position. Try putting your fingers properly curved on the fingerboard, then let the elbow just hang where it wants to. That's about where you want it to be, though you won't want to just let it hang or the violin will start drooping down, which can eventually lead to other problems. But when we go to the D and G string, I simply move my elbow forward, so each string has its own elbow position. The same thing will be useful later when you start shifting. To keep the fingers curved so you can get enough power in the fingers to put down the fingertips comfortably, you're going to need to bring your elbow out. To review, start in rest position, take the violin and put it in front of you between 10 and 11 o'clock, turn it up, bring it toward your shoulder, rest it on your collarbone, use your jaw and just the weight of your head to hold the violin, bring your left hand out, the hand and the index finger touching the fingerboard, and the rest of the hand coming in just enough so the fingers can find their places. Balance around the third finger with the base of the finger around the height of the fingerboard. Put the thumb across from the fingers where it's comfortable, using the top of the thumb and leaving a space between the base of the thumb and the index finger. Keep your wrist straight and let the elbow find a neutral position.
So, enough information for you yet? Don't worry too much about getting it all right or getting it all wrong right at the start. See if you can just develop some healthy basics and then stay open to experimentation from there. It can also be very helpful to check your posture in a mirror or by recording yourself and watching back video footage. And I've put the summary of the main points of this video in the description below, so you can also save that and use it for reference. Like I said at the beginning of the video, learning violin takes time, and everyone teaches a little differently. So if you're still confused and want to find out more, go check out some other videos by other teachers. Not every video is equally good, but there are a few I would recommend. One particularly good one is on Violin channel. It's by Julia Bushkova, just a basic introduction to left-hand technique, very good for beginners, very clear, I would recommend that. The other video is by the brilliant violist and teacher Kim Kashkashian, who did a short video on how to develop a natural left-hand technique, so I would check that out as well. I'll put a link to both of those videos in the description. And you're welcome to go practice now, or if you want to learn a little bit more about why I play the way I do and how violin playing developed, stick around for a little bit.
This is what a violin used to look like in its earlier days. No shoulder rest, no chin rest, no fine tuners, gut strings, and a lower bridge.
The chin rest was invented around 1820, which means that everything written for violin by Vivaldi, Bach, Haydn, Mozart, and even most of Beethoven, including most of the quartets and the violin concerto, was written for violins without chin rest and without shoulder rest. Violins were played balanced on the collarbone, the shoulder, and the left hand, with the chin helping out for shifting and then releasing again when the left hand could take over. Shoulder rests also didn't become standard practice until well into the 20th century. Even most of the greats in the 20th century played without shoulder rests, and many people today still do. I stopped using a shoulder rest on viola a few years ago after I did a summer camp where I was playing Baroque viola and nothing but Baroque viola for several weeks straight. I had to basically relearn how to play the instrument, and I ended up transferring a lot of those techniques back to my modern instrument playing.
On the viola, I just used one of those cutlery drawer liner things, folded a few times and held in place with an elastic. Got it at the dollar store. For me, the viola and the chin rest together give enough height, and this is just to keep it from slipping around.
With the violin, I still go back and forth depending on my mood and if I forgot my shoulder rest at home. What I particularly like about the lack of shoulder rest is the freedom it gives me to move. Let me demonstrate with my viola. Here's the conundrum. When you use a shoulder rest, it keeps the violin in place and frees out the left hand, but it makes it a lot harder to move the instrument around. Now the thing about that is that the left hand is turned in to play the violin or viola to be almost parallel with the fingerboard. This is not a very natural position, and the further that we bring the violin in, the further our left hand has to twist. So in that regard, it's a lot better to keep the instrument out here because it's less strain on the left hand. But when we add the bow into the equation, things get a little hairy. See, when we play with the bow over here, suddenly my right shoulder has to twist in. And that's not particularly comfortable for the right shoulder all the time, especially if you don't have the longest arms to start with. You know how when you try to balance on something, you're never actually standing completely still. You're always making micro adjustments. Well, that's how I view playing viola without a shoulder rest. It's a matter of balance. I'm constantly making micro adjustments to balance between the needs of my bow and the needs of my left hand. There you have it. The great violin hold and shoulder rest debate continues. Like I said, don't be too worried about getting it all right or getting it all wrong. Just try to get the basics, stay open to experimentation, and have fun. Of course, now that you know how to hold the violin, you should probably also figure out how to hold the bow. I'll make a video about that soon. Keep an eye out for it. I'll probably end up linking it somewhere in this video when it's out. Or if you want to get playing right away, check out my beginner violin play-along playlist. Keep practicing. Good luck, and have fun.